They treated me like a burden. I became untouchable. Before I share this story, I want to know you're here with me. Just comment listening below or let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most clearly, this story is for you. Sometimes the greatest power comes not from forcing people to acknowledge you, but from finally acknowledging yourself. Thank you for being here. Now let me tell you what happened. The annual Manning Group board retreat was held at the family estate outside London. 40 executives, advisors, and family members gathered in the Grand Hall for 3 days of strategic planning and celebration. I sat near the back of the room, watching my father Victor take the stage. He was 72, still commanding, still certain of his authority over every space he entered. I want to recognize the exceptional contributions of my children to this company's success, he began, his voice carrying across the room. He turned to my brother Grant first. Grant has led our European expansion with vision and discipline. Under his leadership, we've doubled our market share in Germany alone. Applause filled the room. Grant stood and nodded graciously. In May, Victor continued, has transformed our marketing division. Her strategies have elevated our brand internationally. More applause. May smiled from her seat near the front. Then Victor moved on to discussing quarterly projections. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that I existed. I sat there feeling the familiar burn of erasure. 33 years old, and I still felt like the ghost at the family table. Around me, executives chatted quietly. No one seemed to notice that Victor had a third child sitting in that room. Or if they noticed, they didn't care. I left during the break and drove to my hotel without saying goodbye to anyone. That night in my hotel room, I couldn't sleep. Memories I usually kept buried surfaced with sharp clarity. I was 8 years old at my school's championship football match. I scored the winning goal and searched the stands for Victor's face. He wasn't there. Grant's debate tournament was the same day, so Victor had gone to that instead. I was 12 when I won the regional science fair. Victor didn't attend the ceremony. He said business dinners couldn't be rescheduled. I was 16 at my graduation. Victor arrived late and left early, staying just long enough to be photographed with Grant, who graduated the same year from a different school. Every milestone, every achievement, every moment when I needed him to see me, he was looking somewhere else. I remembered my mother Angela trying to compensate. She would bake my favorite cookies after Victor missed another event. She would tell me he was just busy, that he loved me in his own way. But love that's invisible looks a lot like indifference. I remembered Grant once telling me, "You're too sensitive. Dad treats everyone the same way." But he didn't. I had watched Victor celebrate Grant's accomplishments with genuine pride. I'd seen him light up when May called with good news. With me, there was only polite distance. As if I were a colleague he tolerated rather than a son he cherished. My hand moved to my jacket pocket, feeling the envelope I had been carrying for 3 weeks. DNA test results. Still unopened. I pulled the envelope from my pocket and stared at it in the dim hotel light. The sender was a private genetic testing company I had used after a strange conversation with my aunt last month. She had mentioned something about Victor and my mother having difficulties around the time I was conceived. She said it carefully, watching my reaction. That conversation had planted a seed of doubt that grew into certainty. I needed to know. I had sent my DNA sample along with a strand of Victor's hair I collected from his bathroom during family dinner. The results arrived 3 weeks ago. I hadn't opened them yet. Some truths, once known, changed everything. But sitting in that hotel room after being erased from Victor's recognition once again, I realized I already knew the answer. I had always known, somewhere deep down. Victor had never treated me like his son because I wasn't. My fingers trembled as I began to open the envelope, then stopped. Not yet. I needed to be strategic about this. If I opened these results now, in this emotional state, I might do something rash. Confront Victor publicly. Demand answers. Make a scene. But making a scene would give Victor control over the narrative. He would frame me as unstable, attention-seeking, problematic. No. If this was going to end, it would end on my terms. I put the envelope back in my pocket and pulled out my laptop instead. Clarity was forming. I needed to confront the truth strategically, not emotionally. 3 months earlier, I had bought Victor a gift. A black Range Rover, the exact model he had always called a real success vehicle. I had it delivered to the estate with a card. Thank you for everything you've built. Lucas, I thought maybe a grand gesture would bridge the distance between us. Maybe showing gratitude would earn recognition. 2 weeks later, I visited the estate for Sunday dinner. The Range Rover was parked in the driveway, gleaming and perfect. Victor's business partner Thomas was there, admiring it. Beautiful vehicle, Thomas said. You have excellent taste, Victor. Victor smiled. A gift from one of our European partners. They know quality when they see it. I stood 10 feet away, frozen. He was claiming my gift as someone else's. Thomas noticed me and nodded politely. Lucas, good to see you. Victor barely glanced my way. Lucas. Yes. How's work? Fine, I managed. I didn't correct him about the car. What was the point? If he wanted to erase even my gifts, nothing I gave him would ever be enough. That night, I realized gestures wouldn't reach him. Money wouldn't. Achievements wouldn't. I could buy him a dozen cars, and he would find ways to pretend they came from anyone but me. Whatever I was searching for in his eyes, love, pride, acknowledgement, it wasn't there. It had never been there. And maybe, I thought as I drove home, it never would be. Unless I stopped searching for it entirely. After the car incident, I made a decision. I needed proof of what I already suspected. During Victor's next birthday dinner at the estate, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I went upstairs to his private bathroom. His hairbrush sat on the marble counter. I pulled 3 strands of hair, making sure each had a root attached for DNA testing. I wrapped them carefully in tissue and put them in my pocket. My hands were shaking, not from fear of being caught, but from the weight of what I was doing. I was about to confirm or destroy the foundation of my entire identity. I sent the hair sample to the same genetic testing company I had used for my own DNA profile. I paid extra for expedited results and maximum privacy. The timing would be perfect. The results would arrive just before the board retreat. If I was right about what they would show, I would attend that retreat knowing the complete truth. Not as Victor's disappointment of a son trying to earn approval, but as someone finally understanding why approval never came. The confirmation email arrived 3 days later. Your comparative DNA analysis will be completed within 2 weeks. I marked the date on my calendar. 2 weeks until I knew for certain. 2 weeks until I stopped wondering why I was never enough for Victor Manning. Because maybe I was never supposed to be his to begin with. I asked Grant to meet me for coffee the week before the retreat. He agreed, though he seemed confused about why I wanted to talk privately. We met at a quiet cafe in Kensington. Grant looked tired but successful as always, dressed in an expensive suit between meetings. What's this about? He asked after we sat down. Do you ever think about how different Father treats us? Grant frowned. What do you mean? I mean he celebrates you in May. He ignores me. You must have noticed. Grant shifted uncomfortably. Father has his way of doing things. He's practical. Not everyone needs constant praise. It's not about praise. It's about acknowledgement. He pretends I don't exist. That's dramatic, Lucas. He mentions you. When? When has he ever publicly recognized anything I've done? Grant was quiet for a moment. Look, maybe he's harder on you because he expects more. Maybe it's his way of pushing you to be better. Or maybe there's another reason. Something in my tone made Grant look at me more carefully. What are you talking about? Nothing. Forget it. Lucas, whatever you're planning for the retreat, don't make waves. The board is already tense about the transition planning. Father doesn't need family drama. Family drama, I repeated. Is that what I am? Grant sighed. You know what I mean. Just keep things smooth, okay? I nodded and changed the subject. But I had learned what I needed to know. Grant saw the difference in treatment and chose to explain it away. He wouldn't be an ally in whatever came next. The night before the retreat, May came to my flat unexpectedly. She looked nervous, holding an old envelope in her hands. I need to give you something, she said. I found it years ago when I was helping Mom clean the attic. She asked me to destroy it, but I couldn't. She handed me the envelope. It was yellowed with age, addressed to my mother in careful handwriting. The return address showed R. Ellis, Ohio. Who is R. Ellis? I asked. I think you should read it. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter dated 34 years ago, written to Angela Manning. If you're pregnant, I will take responsibility. Even if we can't be together, I want you to know I'll do what I can. Just don't let the boy grow up thinking he doesn't belong. The letter was signed Robert Ellis. I stared at the date. March 1991. I was born in December 1991. The timeline matched perfectly. May, how long have you known about this? I found it 3 years ago. I didn't know what to do with it. I thought about telling you 100 times. Her eyes were wet. Lucas, I think Robert Ellis is your biological father. I looked at the letter again. The careful handwriting, the genuine concern, the promise to be there for a child he might never meet. Everything suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. Victor's distance wasn't cruelty. It was awareness. He had known from the beginning that I wasn't his son, and he'd spent 33 years punishing me for existing. After May left, I sat alone with the letter for hours, reading it over and over until the words blurred. All my achievements, the honors degree from Cambridge, the successful career in finance, the attempt to please Victor in every possible way, all of it had been trying to gain approval from someone who never wanted me. Every dismissed accomplishment, every ignored milestone, every moment of erasure. It wasn't about me being insufficient. It was about me being a reminder of something Victor wanted to forget. I thought about the DNA results still unopened in my drawer. I didn't need to open them anymore. This letter confirmed what I had suspected, but the revelation didn't hurt the way I expected. Instead, I felt something like relief. For 33 years, I had questioned my worth. Wondered what was wrong with me that Victor couldn't love me. Tried desperately to fix some invisible flaw. Now I understood. There was no flaw. I was simply the wrong person trying to earn love from someone who had decided not to give it. The question wasn't, why am I not enough for him? The question was, why did I keep asking someone incapable of seeing me to validate my existence? I pulled out my laptop and searched for Robert Ellis in Ohio. Several results appeared. I found one that matched the address from the letter. An email address was listed on a professional directory. I stared at it for a long time before closing my laptop. Not yet. First, I needed to reclaim control on my own terms. Without anger. Without needing anyone's permission. The board retreat was in 2 days. I could skip it. I could confront Victor with the letter. I could expose everything and watch the family mythology collapse. But that would give Victor power over my truth. He would control the narrative, frame me as disruptive, rewrite history to protect himself. No, I would attend the retreat. I would sit in that room and let Victor ignore me one more time. But this time I would know exactly why, and I would know it didn't define my worth. I opened Robert Ellis's email and began typing. Mr. Ellis, I recently came across a letter you wrote to Angela Manning in 1991. I believe we may be related. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I exist. Lucas. I stared at the draft for 10 minutes before deleting it. Not yet. I needed to be clear about who I was before reaching out to a stranger who might be my father. I spent the next 2 days preparing mentally. Every time I felt anger rising about Victor's treatment, I reminded myself, his opinion of me was based on a lie he chose to live. I wasn't going to the retreat to earn recognition. I was going to observe, to see the family dynamics with new eyes. And when a moment was right, I would walk away from all of it. Not in rage, in clarity. I visualized walking into that retreat fully in control, knowing the truth Victor thought was still buried. That image felt like freedom. I spent the morning of the retreat revisiting every memory of Victor's coldness, but this time with new understanding. The time he forgot my birthday entirely, but threw Grant an elaborate party. Not cruelty, just treating me as someone outside the family. The time he introduced Grant and May to important clients, but left me standing alone in the corner. Not oversight, just accurate classification in his mind. The time I overheard him tell someone, my sons are very different. Grant has my drive. Lucas is, well, he tries. Every dismissal, every slight, every moment of erasure had been Victor's way of keeping distance from a child who reminded him of his wife's infidelity. I used those memories as armor now. Each one proved that his rejection said nothing about my worth and everything about his choices. I wasn't broken. I was just never his to break. I thought about May's courage in giving me that letter, about Grant's inability to see what was happening, about my mother Angela's quiet complicity in maintaining the lie. They had all chosen to protect Victor's comfort over my truth. But I was about to choose differently, not by attacking them, by simply refusing to keep seeking approval I was never meant to receive. I dressed carefully for the retreat. Professional, calm, untouchable. The retreat would be the stage for my quiet revolution. Not dramatic, just deliberate. I checked into the hotel near the estate the night before the retreat began. The same hotel where I had sat after being ignored at countless family events. I looked around my room at the familiar furniture, the view of the estate in the distance. How many times had I stayed here, feeling small and uncertain? I realized that appearing small had been a learned habit. Victor's manipulations had taught me to shrink, to apologize for existing, to constantly try to earn space I already deserved. Tonight felt different. I opened the DNA results envelope finally. The genetic markers were clear. 0% probability of paternal relationship with Victor Manning. I read the results 3 times. Not with shock, but with confirmation. I pulled out May's letter from Robert Ellis and read it again alongside the DNA results. The timeline, the care in his words, the promise to be present. I realized I had spent my whole life mourning a father who didn't want me, while ignoring the possibility of one who might. Tomorrow at the retreat, I would watch Victor perform his usual theater. He would praise Grant and May. He would ignore me completely. But this time, I would know it meant nothing. His approval had never been available because I was never supposed to be his. I decided the retreat would be my final performance in their script. After this, I would write my own. I fell asleep feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace with being exactly who I was. The retreat began Saturday morning in the estate's grand hall. Executives filled the leather chairs arranged in rows facing the presentation stage. Family members sat in the front section. Victor stood at the podium in a tailored suit, commanding attention effortlessly. "Welcome to our annual strategic retreat," he began. "This year marks 35 years since I founded Manning Group. What started as a small investment firm now manages £2 billion in assets across 3 continents." Polite applause. This success is built on vision, discipline, and most importantly, family legacy. He gestured to Grant and May sitting in the front row. "My children have proven themselves worthy stewards of what we're building." Grant nodded seriously. May smiled. Victor continued discussing quarterly performance, market trends, and expansion plans. I sat 4 rows back, observing the power dynamics with new clarity. The executives watched Victor with calculated attention. They weren't listening to a leader. They were watching a performance they had seen before. Grant checked his phone twice during the presentation. May took notes, but looked bored. Victor never glanced in my direction. Not once during his 30-minute speech. I felt nothing. No hurt. No anger. Just observation. This was their world. Their carefully constructed mythology. And I finally understood I didn't belong in it. Not because I was insufficient, but because it was never meant for me. During the lunch break, I returned to my hotel room and read May's letter again alongside the DNA results. The documents sat on the desk like evidence in a case I had been building against myself for 33 years. But the verdict was clear. I had been judged by the wrong jury. Victor's dismissal wasn't a reflection of my failures. It was a reflection of his inability to see past his own wounded pride. I pulled out my phone and searched for Robert Ellis again. I found his professional profile. He was an engineer, retired now, living in a small town in Ohio. His profile picture showed a kind-eyed man in his 70s. I stared at his face, looking for resemblances. The shape of the eyes, maybe. The slight smile. Knowledge felt like armor. I didn't need Victor's approval to define myself. I had built a successful career, earned respect in my field, lived with integrity. The only person who had ever questioned my worth was the one person whose opinion shouldn't have mattered. I formulated a plan. I would finish this retreat with quiet dignity. Then I would begin the process of separating myself completely from the Manning name and identity. Not in anger, in clarity. I would reach out to Robert Ellis when I was ready, not desperately seeking a replacement father, but calmly exploring a connection that might have always been there. And I would finally stop performing for an audience that would never applaud. That afternoon, I drove to the bakery in town where my mother used to take me as a child. It was still there after all these years, the same blue awning and wooden benches outside. I sat at a corner table with coffee, remembering all the times Angela had brought me here after Victor missed another event. She would buy me a chocolate croissant and tell me stories to distract from the disappointment. She meant well, but she never defended me, never challenged Victor's treatment. I called her number. She answered on the third ring. Lucas? Is everything all right? I'm at the bakery, the one you used to take me to. Can you come? 30 minutes later, she arrived. She looked older, tired. She sat across from me without ordering anything. May told you, didn't she? Angela said quietly. About the letter. Yes. I should have destroyed it years ago. Why didn't you? She looked down at her hands. Because it was the only proof that someone wanted you. That someone saw value in you before you were even born. Did Victor know from the beginning? He knew I was pregnant when we reconciled. He chose to accept you as his. I thought that meant he would love you like his own. But he didn't. No, she whispered. He didn't, and I couldn't defend you without admitting the truth. I chose his comfort over your protection. That's my failure. We sat in silence. I understand now, I said finally. That real power comes from self-acceptance, not from earning approval from people who can't give it. Angela's eyes filled with tears. The retreat continued Sunday morning with boardroom discussions about company direction and inheritance planning. I attended, but remained officially silent during the strategic sessions. Victor led conversations about succession planning. He spoke about Grant's readiness to take over European operations and May's vision for expanding into Asian markets. My name came up once when an executive asked about family involvement. Lucas handles some administrative matters, Victor said dismissively, though he's more focused on his independent career at this point. The executive nodded. I said nothing. During a break, Victor was discussing quarterly projections with 3 board members. He gestured toward someone across the room. Marcus, I need those files. I was standing directly next to him. He was looking at me, but calling me Marcus, the name of a junior analyst who worked in accounting. One board member gently corrected him. That's Lucas, Victor. Victor barely paused. Yes, of course. Lucas. The files. I didn't have any files. I wasn't Marcus. And Victor knew that. But erasing my name, replacing it with someone else's, was just another way of making me invisible. The board member who had corrected him looked uncomfortable. He had witnessed the erasure and chosen to say nothing more. I walked away calmly. I felt observers watching, wondering how I would react. I gave them nothing. No anger. No hurt. Just quiet absence. My moment was coming. But it wouldn't be loud. That afternoon, Victor called everyone back to the main hall for a major announcement. The energy in the room shifted to anticipation. Cameras were set up. Financial journalists had been invited. This was going to be news. Victor stood at the podium with Grant beside him. May sat in the front row, looking pleased. Today marks a significant milestone for Manning Group, Victor began. We're announcing our acquisition of Westfield Capital, a £450 million transaction that expands our portfolio significantly. Advisors applauded. Cameras flashed. This acquisition was led by my son Grant, who demonstrated the vision and discipline required to close a deal of this magnitude. Effective immediately, Grant will serve as Chief Operating Officer with full operational authority. Grant shook Victor's hand for the cameras. The performance was flawless. This represents the continuation of Manning Group's legacy, Victor continued. My son will lead us into the next era of growth. He never looked at me once during the entire announcement. I sat in the back, absorbing every word, not with hurt, but with clarity. This was Victor's final statement about my place in his world. I had no place. Never did. The journalists asked questions about the acquisition. Grant answered with confidence. May added comments about marketing integration. No one asked about the third child sitting in the back of the room. I sensed my moment coming, not with noise, but with quiet, deliberate impact. When the presentation ended, I walked out before anyone could stop me. That night in my hotel room, I made my decision. I would not confront Victor publicly. I would not expose the DNA results at the retreat. I would not create a scene. My victory would be internal and strategic. Public confrontation would give Victor control of the narrative. He would frame me as bitter, unstable, seeking attention. The family would close ranks. I would be cast as the villain in their story. Instead, I would simply walk away. Quietly, completely, on my own terms. I would remove myself from Manning Group, from family events, from the entire mythology they had constructed. Not in anger, in clarity. I pulled out my laptop and began drafting emails. The first was to the Manning Group board, formally resigning from any advisory positions I held. The second was to my accountant, requesting immediate separation of any shared financial accounts with the family trust. The third was to my attorney, asking for documentation to legally change my surname. I would stop being Lucas Manning. I would become Lucas Ellis, not to hurt Victor, but to free myself. I would take control of the story after the retreat, where no one expected me, where they couldn't interfere or explain away or minimize. I would simply disappear from their version of reality, and I would build my own. Monday morning, I began implementing my plan. I updated my email signature at work. Lucas Ellis, not Lucas Manning. Colleagues noticed immediately. Name change, my manager asked during our morning meeting. Reclaiming my identity, I said simply, long story. She didn't press for details. I updated my LinkedIn profile, my business cards, my professional accounts. Everywhere the Manning name appeared, I replaced it with Ellis. It felt like shedding skin that had never fit properly. I received a confused email from Grant. Why did you change your surname on LinkedIn? Is this some kind of statement? I didn't respond. My mother called twice. I didn't answer. By end of day Monday, my entire professional identity had shifted. Lucas Manning, the overlooked third child of Victor Manning, no longer existed in official records. Lucas Ellis, independent financial analyst with his own merit, had taken his place. The shift was subtle but complete. I hadn't announced it, hadn't explained it, just quietly implemented it. People who knew me professionally accepted it without question. People who only knew me as Victor's son would eventually notice I had disappeared. But I wouldn't be there to see their reactions. I would be building something new. Tuesday morning, I received an email response to the message I had finally sent to Robert Ellis. Lucas, I've hoped to hear from you for 33 years. I'd like to meet whenever you're ready. No expectations, just connection. Robert. I stared at the email for a long time before responding. I'm ready. When and where? I flew to Ohio the following week. Robert Ellis lived in a small town outside Columbus, in a house surrounded by maple trees. I knocked on the door, not knowing what to expect. The man who answered was older than his profile picture, but his eyes were kind. Lucas, he said simply. Come in. We didn't discuss DNA. Didn't analyze test results. Didn't have tearful confessions. We just sat in his living room drinking coffee, talking about ordinary things. His career in engineering. My work in finance. The weather. Books we had read recently. After an hour, he said, I want you to know I never stopped thinking about you. Your mother and I weren't together long, but when she told me she was pregnant, I meant what I wrote in that letter. I would have been there. Why weren't you? Victor convinced her it was better for you to have a stable family. 2 parents. His name. His resources. She thought she was giving you advantages I couldn't provide. She gave me a family that never wanted me. Robert was quiet for a moment. That's his failure, not yours. You turned out remarkable despite him, not because of him. For the first time in my life, someone acknowledged my worth without qualification, without comparison to Grant or May, without measuring me against Victor's expectations. Just simple recognition that I existed and mattered. We talked for hours. When I left, Robert hugged me carefully. Come back whenever you want, he said. No expectations, just connection. I drove away experiencing genuine acceptance for the first time in 33 years. The next week, May gave me a key to a private storage room at the estate. She had found it while helping sort through grandfather's belongings after his death. "There are letters in there," she said, "from grandfather to father. I think you should read them." I drove to the estate when I knew Victor would be traveling. The storage room was in the basement, behind the wine cellar. Inside were boxes of correspondence, business documents, and personal letters spanning decades. I found letters from my grandfather to Victor, dated from the early 1990s, the year I was born. One letter stood out, dated December 1991. "Victor, I understand your anger about Angela's infidelity, but that child is innocent. Don't punish him for her mistakes. You have a choice. Love him as your son, or let him go to someone who will. But don't keep him and resent him. That's cruelty." Victor's response was filed in the next folder. "I've made my choice. He'll bear my name, but never my heart. Angela's debt to me is paid with her silence." I sat on the concrete floor reading letter after letter. My grandfather had tried to intervene. He had seen what Victor was doing and tried to stop it. But Victor had refused. He had deliberately chosen to keep me close while withholding love. Not for my benefit, for punishment. The letters felt like confessions. Evidence of Victor's hidden cowardice. Proof that he knew exactly what he was doing. I spent 3 hours reading through the correspondence. The pattern was clear. My grandfather had urged Victor repeatedly to either embrace me fully or release me to Robert Ellis. Instead, Victor had chosen a third path. Keep me, but keep me diminished. One letter from 1998, when I was 7, particularly struck me. "Victor, I watched you ignore Lucas at Grant's birthday party. That boy stood alone while you celebrated his brother. This isn't strength. It's cowardice. You're punishing a child for adult failures." Victor's response: "My methods are my own. Lucas will learn his place." I photographed every letter carefully, not for revenge, but for truth. These letters proved that Victor's treatment wasn't unconscious bias or personality difference. It was calculated psychological punishment spanning decades. I understood now that courage and cowardice aren't always visible. Victor appeared powerful and decisive in business. But in his personal life, he was a coward who blamed an innocent child for his wounded pride. The letters also showed that Robert Ellis had tried to stay involved. He had sent letters asking to meet me, to be part of my life. Victor had returned them all unopened. Robert had been denied a relationship with his son to satisfy Victor's need for control and punishment. I felt rage building, then let it pass. Anger would only trap me in Victor's narrative. Instead, I felt clarity. I understood completely now, and understanding meant I could finally let go. On my drive back to London, I stopped at a rest area off the motorway. I pulled out a letter I had written weeks ago, but never sent. It was addressed to Victor, explaining everything I had discovered. The DNA results. Robert Ellis. The grandfather's letters. Every piece of evidence proving his decades of deliberate cruelty. The letter demanded answers, accountability, acknowledgement. I read it once more, then pulled out a lighter. I walked to a clearing near the rest area and burned the letter page by page, watching the paper curl and blacken. I didn't need Victor's answers. I didn't need his acknowledgement. I didn't need him to admit what he had done or apologize for who he had been. I needed to release my need for any of that. The burning letter felt symbolic. I was releasing not just the words, but the part of me that still sought validation from someone incapable of giving it. As the last page turned to ash, I felt something shift inside. Not anger dissolving, not forgiveness forming, just acceptance. I accepted that Victor had made his choices. I accepted that those choices said nothing about my worth. I accepted that I could build a meaningful life without his approval or acknowledgement. I got back in my car and drove toward London, feeling lighter than I had in years. I resolved to define myself entirely on my own terms. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Ohio. Robert had invited me to visit his home properly, with no agenda other than getting to know each other. His house was modest but warm. Family photos lined the walls. Books filled every shelf. There was a garden out back where he grew tomatoes and herbs. We spent the afternoon talking, not about Victor or the past, about the present and future. Robert told me about his career, his late wife who had passed 5 years earlier, his work with local engineering students. I never had other children, he said. After your mother told me about you, I couldn't bring myself to build a family knowing my son was out there somewhere. You could have fought for custody. Your mother believed Victor could give you a better life. I trusted her judgment. I was wrong to do that, but I can't change it now. We sat in his garden as evening fell. The air smelled like fresh herbs and earth. I don't need you to be my father, I said carefully. I'm 33. I've built my life, but I'd like to know you on equal terms. Robert smiled. I like that too. We talked until midnight. He showed me photos of his parents, my biological grandparents I never knew. He explained family history, where the Ellis name came from. I experienced genuine connection without performance, without needing to prove my worth or earn approval. Just two people choosing to know each other. When I left, Robert walked me to my rental car. You can grow in the right environment, he said. You've spent years in the wrong soil. Now you're transplanting yourself somewhere you can actually thrive. I realized he was right. I had been planted in the wrong family, wrong expectations, wrong definition of success. Now I was finally choosing my own ground. Back in New York, I sat in my apartment and thought about the childhood I never had. A father who saw me. A family that celebrated me. Simple moments of belonging. I couldn't change the past, but I could create something meaningful from it. I opened my laptop and started a podcast. The first episode was titled The Invisible Child. I recorded for 30 minutes, talking about what it feels like to grow up dismissed by people who should have protected you. About seeking approval from sources that will never provide it. About the moment you realize your worth isn't determined by anyone's recognition. I didn't name Victor or the Manning family. I just told my story honestly. Within a week, the episode had 5,000 downloads. Comments flooded in from people who felt unseen in their own families, their own jobs, their own relationships. I've been seeking approval from a parent who will never give it. Your story helped me see I can stop now. Thank you for putting words to something I've felt my whole life. This made me realize I'm not broken. The people who can't see me are. My voice began reaching far beyond the family that ignored me. I recorded more episodes. About boundaries. About self-worth. About building identity independent of family mythology. The audience grew. People shared their own stories. A community formed around the simple idea that you don't need permission to matter. I had spent 33 years trying to be seen by one person who refused to look. Now, thousands of people were choosing to listen. 6 months after the retreat, I visited my grandfather's grave. I stood there in the quiet cemetery, reading his headstone. I had learned from May's letters that he had tried to protect me. He had challenged Victor's cruelty and paid for it by being slowly cut off from the family. Thank you, I said to the gravestone, for trying. I didn't visit Victor or attend family events. I simply removed myself completely. No announcements. No explanations. Just quiet absence. Grant sent confused emails asking why I had stopped coming to family gatherings. I didn't respond. May understood. She called occasionally just to check in. Our relationship survived because she had chosen truth over comfort. My mother sent a letter apologizing for her complicity. I read it once and filed it away. Maybe someday I would forgive her. Maybe not. Either way, I wasn't waiting for permission to move forward. Victor never reached out. I suspected he barely noticed I was gone. The podcast continued growing. I spoke at events about self-worth and boundary setting. People approached me after every talk thanking me for giving voice to their own experiences of being unseen. I built relationships based on genuine connection, not performance. I dated someone who valued me without conditions. I made friends who chose me, not my family name. Robert and I spoke weekly. We visited each other quarterly. The relationship was real because it wasn't forced. I had spent 33 years being treated like a burden by people who should have treasured me. I had performed and proven and begged for approval that was never going to come. Now I was untouchable, not because I was cold or distant or vengeful, but because I finally understood that my worth wasn't determined by anyone's recognition. Not Victor's, not the Manning family's, not anyone's. I chose myself. I defined my value. I built a life that mattered on my own terms. They treated me like a burden. I became untouchable. And in that transformation, I discovered something they would never understand. Freedom isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. It's about refusing to let their inability to see you determine your vision of yourself. I was finally free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible to people who should have seen you, comment below. Share where you're watching from. You're not alone in this experience. Subscribe for more stories about choosing self-worth over approval, about becoming untouchable by defining your own value. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to matter. You already do. Until next time, choose yourself. You're worth it.